Hello and welcome to Fiber Trek. My name is Sarah. Welcome. You are most welcome to my studio space here in the North Woods of Maine. On this edition, we are going to take a look at some of my quilting adventures, as well as catch you up on all of the knitting progress and some new woolly acquisitions. If you are a patron of this podcast, a deep heartfelt thank you for your financial support and contribution. I am humbled and encouraged. I value the insight and comments that come my way. I'm so glad you're here. Let's catch up.
Sitting at my seat, staring out the window, and if that bell would ring, then outside we would go. It's time to go to the playground. Let's all run to the playground. We can dance down to the playground where we can run around. It's time to go to the playground. Let's all run to the playground and have fun on the playground where we can run around.
I want you to push me on the swing and slide me down the slide, or see me on the song. We don't want to go back inside. No, we want
to go to the playground. Let's all run to the playground. We can dance down to the playground where we can run around. It's time to go to the playground. Let's all run to the playground and have fun on the playground where we can run around.
I had finished this quilt by Miss May Makes called Clava this past summer, and originally I had adhered it down with some fabric spray, but I wanted to reinforce that with pinning as I had decided to hand quilt this particular project based on my experience with my baby quilt. So I went ahead and pinned out everything except for the middle moon, which is where I was going to start hand stitching. I had decided for this particular quilt that I would stitch each of the moons in a sashiko stitch and then do some echoing hand stitching on the night sky. Originally, I decided to use a Hera marker to mark out the grid, and I used a variety of different books in my library to decide on the sizing and space of my stitching. And for this moon, I went with a 1 by 1 inch grid. Unfortunately, I really couldn't see it, and so I rolled the dice and tried out this Dritz Easy Marker and used that to not only mark out the grid, but also to mark out the circle templates. I am planning to hand stitch this with Aurifil 12 weight in a burnished gold color, and I am looking forward to experimenting with different tensioning techniques. I am not planning to use a hoop, and I am hoping that just the weight of the quilt and my position on the table, or potentially in a more comfortable setting, will work out. I'm happy with my initial endeavor, and I think that my technique will hopefully improve as I work through the whole quilt. The fabrics I used for this quilt are from Wyndham Fabrics in their Uncorked line, which has a really beautiful metallic element to it. I did detail the finishing and completed piece for the baby quilt on my February Patreon vlog, and it was really motivating to move that out the door and into its new home. I have a feeling that on the next edition, we'll be looking at Madison's quilt, and I am looking forward to getting back to piecing again. But in the meantime, I think I have my work cut out for me with the stitching. Welcome to the fiber portion of the episode. I'm looking forward to sharing with you a number of projects that I have ongoing, some new, some old, a finished item, hallelujah, right? I had a glorious week off with my niece and nephew, as you saw before, where I could really kind of take stock and delve in and relax without a impending commute. For those of you that don't know, I commute between my parents' home and my home up here in the north, where I work down south, and so I am down there 4 nights a week. And sometimes, and as I'm realizing, that doesn't always lead to the most consistent practice. I take a lot of knitting when I go, and this time of year here in Maine, which is winter, can also lead to unforeseeable non-commutes. So I end up having to stay at my parents' for longer periods of time due to weather. And so far, so I have had pretty good free and clear Fridays and Mondays to get back and forth. If you are a patron of this podcast, as I'm sure I said at the intro, thank you so much for your financial contribution. If you're interested in supporting the work here, I do upload a bonus video over on my Patreon account. It is a $3 per episode charge. I never upload more than 2 times per month. So $6, I have one tier. If you are not able to do that, thank you so much for investing your time, your comments, and your insight here. I am so thankful for all that show up and help me keep this creative process and project going. Thank you. Let's go right to the knitting because I have finally finished something. I had been working on, I have a lot of stuff here, just bear with me. The J by Rachel Brockman. This is a free pattern on the Universal Yarns website. It is knit in a DK weight, and it has this really lovely kind of delicate yoke design. This is what really drew me to it. I just love, it's like again, very kind of delicate and single stitches. I think that it is a really beautiful way to exemplify contrast yarns or just natural colored yarns. I just think it's really stunning in this high contrast. I knit this out of Norwegian Norsk Spellsau wool from HomeGuard, and I picked that up on my trip to Norway in 2020, and here it is finished. You may remember that if you had picked up, I can't remember when I last talked about this, I finished the cuffs and I had done a seed stitch and they were very wide. I've ripped that out and I just ended up doing a very short contrast cuff in my own Icelandic wool yarn, which is just about a sport weight. And I just did a garter stitch, very thin, and then bound off tightly. I left these sleeves fairly wide. They are very pragmatic utilitarian sleeves. I can pull them up, I can get them over things, doing the dishes, out for a ski, whatever. So the whole sweater is for practicality's sake, which is like most of my knitting. And again, here's the other side. Contrast in white on the collar and the hem. The collar and the hem are both done in seed stitch, and the cuffs are done in garter. So yeah, and I've worn it. I haven't skied in it, but I have had it outside, and it's a really nice cozy layer, not too heavy, but it does have some nice density to it. So hooray! Let's see. So with that off the needles, I actually turned my attention to another Norwegian knit, which is the Fox, oh God, Koften, I can't remember the name of it in Norwegian. Anyway, this is from the Kofteboken 2 and 3 book. And I have the Kofteboken 3, and I'm knitting this, and I have been since the beginning of the middle of 2020, out of Hillesvåg in the Cognac, the Solia, and the Vilja, which is their lamb's wool yarn in the contrast white. So Cognac and white. Now where I was, the saga of this sweater is that it's been translated from Norwegian by my friend Sue, who is also knitting a matching sweater, not in the same colors. So it's not technically matching, but it is we're both knitting a version of this. And I had knit this, I had messed up some of the chart work, and so I had ripped it back. It's been, I think this is re-engineered. I think I'm knitting it top down. I've made up some of my own numbers, and to, just extrapolating based on the chart. And so I cast off in a garter stitch at the hem, and I have picked up for the sleeve and made quite a showing on my progress here. So this was a little bit fiddly to do because I wanted the color work to match up on the underarm. So I had to kind of do some calculations, but ultimately I persevered and on I went. Now I did try this on and it was definitely a sausage casing moment. I was like, oh, 2020 was 3 years ago. So I tried it on. I felt slightly disheartened because it was like a negative ease situation, but I blocked it pretty ruggedly. I put it in the washing machine. I filled the washing machine, put it in the washing machine, spin and lock, cycle, took it out, and then I just, put my hands, I put it on too, which is how I like to block some of my sweaters. But I put it on and I just stretched it, and then I laid it out, and it is so beautiful now that it's blocked, and it fits nice. It has just a little bit of positive ease. It's not like hugging my body, but it is definitely a sweater that I won't be able to wear a number of layers underneath. So again, I am knitting this on a US 3 in the Hillesvåg line. Most everything is been played around with from the pattern. They're not hard patterns necessarily to translate. I know there's a lot of resources out there, but there are a lot of beautiful sweaters in those books. So if you can get your hands on them and you are up for a little, linguist challenge, then I would highly recommend delving into not only this Hillesvåg yarn, which you're going to hear more about later, but these beautiful designs. So I'd love to have this sleeve done here in the next few weeks. Wouldn't it be amazing to have this finished? I am in the process of planning a trip to the Yukon and Scotland. I would love to have this for crossing the Arctic Circle. It'd be amazing. Anyway, okay. Now, what else have I worked on? Well, I picked back up on the Kairuna by Ronja Hakolito. This is a shawl that I'm knitting out of Tidal Yarns, who is a natural dyer and fleece-wise woman out of Connecticut, and she is often on the show circuit here in New England in the United States. So if you have an opportunity to go to her booth, I would highly recommend it. Probably one of my most favorite yarns for a very, very, very long time. And Anyway, I'm obviously in mid-row. Part of that is because I needed to ball up some new yarn. But this is a large shawl that's combination of garter stitch and lace edging. But mostly I'm just wondering if you're going to be able to pick up on the color here. So beautiful. I think this is indigo and weld, and picking up on some of the highlights in perhaps over a gray wool that was dyed. So I have just about 15 or 20 more rows of the chart work to do, and then this will be finished, so I don't think that'll be long. Here I've been experimenting with some of my homespun or hand spun for another shawl that I'm thinking about, so that's been happening. I talked a little bit about that over on the February bonus video on Patreon. A little bit more about my spinning over there this past month, which has really invigorated some ideas for not only knitting, but more hand spun projects that I've got on the go. Now, I also have been working on Madison's shawl. Madison is my niece. I knit my nephew a Plötulopi Icelandic yoke sweater, and she wanted a knitwear item as well. She's a little bit more sensitive to texture, so I was able to try out this Manchalopi on her, and she really enjoyed it. This is a very plush, velvety, spongy wool that comes from the Manchega, the Mancha sheep in Spain, who produce the Manchego cheese. Comes in these cheeses. They released a couple new colors that I wasn't familiar with, and this deep pink really caught Maddie's eye, no surprise. And the contrast that I'm using is this very light blue. It's almost a gray. So I had tried to convince her to go with like a charcoal. I thought the contrast would be really fun, but she was pretty steadfast in that blue color. So this is the Nicole shawl by Amy Scher, and yikes. I am currently on the second lace repeat, and then it finishes with this garter stripe. So I think the lace repeat is just about 36 rows. I'm on row 7 of that repeat, so a few to go, and then the stripe. So love to have this for Madison so she can enjoy it here in the early spring. We'll see how that goes. It is quite quick to knit up. I'm knitting it on a US 9, and I think that's really it. Easy pattern to follow and easy lace to read. She has it both written in the chart form, and she has it written out. Once I am able to figure out what the visual piece is, it's, you know, you can pretty much figure out where your yarn overs should go, etc. So in tracking your lace, as it's really quite simple. Not anything like the Kairuna, which is requiring me a little bit more attention. So that's another thing that is on the go. So I've got Manchalopi, I've got Hillesvåg, I've got Tidal Yarns. Let's see. Okay, let's go to what I cast on. So I was so inspired by Cameron's knit, and I had talked about working with this book, The Best of Lopi, a while ago. It's one of like the first books I bought when I was a knitter 20 plus years ago, and there's just been a little bit of chat here and there about pre-Ravelry days, and you know, going to the yarn store, you had to buy a book, you had to go through all their binders, find a pattern that fit with your idea, or invent your own. And anyway, so I've just been thinking about that a lot, and so I decided to re-knit the sweater Zora, which was one of my, I'm hopefully having a picture right here for you, which was one of my first sweaters I ever knit. Was this in a dark brown. Projects on my Ravelry page. And unfortunately, it fell ill to moths. I think it started to come apart. It really got put through the ringer. And so I ended up composting that, just getting rid of it because it wasn't salvageable. And I was very concerned about the infestation of moths in it. So that being said, I've cast on a new Zora. And again, I'm in the middle of a row. and I am really excited to kind of have come full circle with some of my knitting. And I've done a lot of different types of knitting, and I'm mostly self-taught, you know, socks, mittens, sweaters, color work. I've never really done intarsia, but I'm not really drawn to that aesthetic. And so to come back and revisit a sweater I've already knit before so long ago, I don't know, it's just been like such a, I don't know how to describe the feeling. Maybe it will come to me. Anyway, let's talk about the project itself. I am knitting this in Alafos Lopi. This is the bulky weight. I knit my original in the Reynolds, as the pattern calls for. And so I am knitting it in this kind of basic beigey brown. I can't remember what the name of this is, if it's ash heather. I ordered all of mine from the Woolly Thistle, and it came quite promptly and had a really nice selection of color. And so I wasn't quite sure how I wanted the yoke to evolve, and so I ordered a couple different colorways, ideas to work with. But I did know I wanted to have a lighter version than my original, which was in the dark chocolate. So for contrast, I picked up these. I wanted it to have, I feel like I'm channeling my inner gentle knitter here, who I don't need to have an introduction for Nicole. She's a podcast. But I was really leaning towards a very subtle contrast in these. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm going to give it a shot. In these kind of pale, ecru, you know, beigey, glacial, kind of coastal colors. So ultimately what I think is going to happen is I'm going to drop this gold, and I am going to end up something, I think it needs 4 colors. I'm going to end up something like this. I'm going to pull that teal. I might use the teal. So it's not going to have a huge contrast line between the main color and the yoke, which is one reason I picked up this teal, in case I just want to have a little bit of a pop or some sort of highlight in the yoke. So it's not it's not a traditional yoke. This whole thing is made up of slip stitches, and so playing around a little bit with low contrast, or there's a word they have in knitting for those fabrics that are low contrast. Tone on tone, maybe, that's what it is. Anyway, so I picked that up. And the other reason I picked up some of that different colors in the Alafos Lopi is that Cameron would like a sweater out of this Icelandic yarn. This is my Sheep Little Pharaoh, one of my original flock members. And I had this spun at a rustic fiber mill in northern Maine, and so he really wanted to have another Icelandic sweater, and so I'm gonna use this as the main color. I think I only have somewhere around 500 or 600 yards of this, so I couldn't do a sweater for myself. And so I picked up some of these other colors to do the yoke for him. So he wasn't super sold on this golden, but I'm not giving him a bunch of choice. He did say he's happy with the brown as a main color, and I have some white that I might be able to incorporate in, but I said I would pick a contrast. Now he does love blue, so I may end up using that teal and gold, we'll see. So that was my Lopi haul, and again, you know, what a fun yarn, what a workhorse yarn. Again, it's like nostalgia city here. The other thing that showed up this month is an order from Wet Coast Wools. They carry a variety of the Hillesvåg line in different yarns, and they had this, the unspun version that Hillesvåg produces. And so I picked it up in the gray, the light gray, and the charcoal. It comes off the plate similar to Manchalopi in 2 strands. If I can find the end here, which I can't. Oh, here we go. 2 strands. And I just wanted to fool around and see how this compares with other, you know, roving, unspun pencil rovings in my stash. So I have New Teden, I have the Manchalope, I have Plotolope, now I have this, and I am going to be looking to grab some of Briggs and Little. So just a little experimentation. I did get enough to knit myself a sweater, and I'm looking forward to working with that. I love kind of the way that this knits up quickly, as you kind of saw on the Manchalope. It has a really light, spongy feel on the needles, and so I think a nice unspun yarn sweater would be great to add to the wardrobe, especially for going to school and working in schools. Something a little bit lighter and not quite as dense and warm as something like Elephas Lope. Anyway, so that showed up, and then I had purchased some Tinda yarn, which is the kind of DK worsted weight of the Norse pelt wool, and I wanted to just round out that stash so I had enough to do a project. So I picked up this Tinda Norse Pelsugarn, and this is, let's see, I just wanted to give you the meterage. It's 100 grams for 260 meters. So you do quite well with this, and I got it in the navy, I got it in dusty light lime, and I picked up some of the brown. This is just brown. And I have in my collection cognac, which is the same color as my Frokengard, and I have a really kind of interesting kind of mossy green, and I have an aqua, like a light turquoise aqua. All of the yarn is over dyed on the pelt sheep, which I think is on the grayish side, has those tones. So it has this really beautiful sparkle, these grays that are dyed, and so heathery looks. I like the way that kind of sparkles. That's the only word I can think of. Just a really dynamic color. The main color I picked up was this in the navy. So that came with the other wool. And really for me, that is what came down the pike for acquisitions, and I'm really excited about it. I've just felt so invigorated since I finished Cameron's sweater. I've revisited the Best of Lopi, and some of these projects are starting to gain some traction and are coming to a finish. I'm thinking about other things. I'm got my wheel going. As I mentioned before, I do find the commute to be really disruptive in the flow of particular projects. But one thing that I have kind of finally, I feel like I am, is with the wave, or potentially a little bit ahead of the wave. I remember talking a couple episodes ago that I was behind the wave. The only thing really left for me is to finish warping that loom. I'm really hoping my friend Patty will come back up and kind of walk me through it and get it done. And it will also be an opportunity for the two of us to visit. And so that's really the only thing that's kind of lingering out there. The baby quilt is finished. I'm quilting the Moon Phases quilt. That's ready to go, as I described earlier, and the wheels are cleared off and projects are thought about. So those things feel settled, and I have a couple other things waiting in the wings that I would like to kind of delve into, which I'm hoping will happen over April vacation. But in the meantime, I'm thoroughly enjoying some of these wools that I've worked with before. Old stash, I use the word old, but it truly is. I mean, some of this stash that I have is, 15 years old. It's so beautiful. I love it. I want to work with it. And it's finding that right project and surfacing. And so I'm happy to I'm here for it. Let's put it that way. The last discovery I wanted to bring your attention to are a few vlogs that I have been really enjoying over the past couple months. The first one is Soulful Spinning, and I've actually followed Lisa for a while, and her channel has been a little reinvigorated over the past couple of months as she is doing a breed study, and which of course included my favorite, North Ronaldsay. She is a wealth of knowledge, and she is bringing a lot of attention to a number of different breeds and spinning techniques and applications. And so I would encourage you, if you are interested in spinning, drop spindling, breed specific fibers, to go check out Lisa's vlog and unearth some of the great content that is happening there. The other is Yarn Chaos. This is Brigitte out of Iceland, and she sometimes hosts her mother, who is also a prolific maker, and it's been really fun to get to know both of them together. Especially, I love the dynamic of the mother and daughter and their real shared love for their makes and the yarn and the landscape and the place in which they live. So I would check out Yarn Chaos. Really fun and relaxing content to knit to. I don't probably need to introduce you to the Knitty Stew. This is Leanne out of Canada. Go check her out. She is supremely popular. There's no reason to not know why. I don't know what that means. What I'm trying to say is, of course she's popular. She has a lovely podcast and a lovely presence. Really great yarn selections and projects, varying from the wools that I prefer, like Lopi and Rauma, and she also loves to hit the indie dyed. So she has a really nice variety of projects to take a look at. The last one I think I've mentioned before is The Republic of Me with Ivana out of Cyprus. I really love her style and aesthetic. I find the vlogs very relaxing. The pace is very inviting and settling, and I would encourage you to go check out not only her knitting, but she also shares other lifestyle endeavors, gardening and weaving and spinning, and her life there in the Mediterranean. So those are just a couple of my favorite vlogs that I really look forward to. When they publish, I get my knitting, I take that time to get grounded and settle and listen and get out of my head and out of my own process. And I appreciate all of the work that goes into doing that, publishing and filming and sharing. So a deep, heartfelt thank you to those content creators, and also a number of the other ones that I watch, which I will periodically share with you. On that note, I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. In the meantime, many fond wishes and blessings. I will see you on the next edition. Take care. Bye.